Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Happy to have you here as we're getting closer for the NBA season to start. Apparently, Stu the Studio Cat said the show started. That's it. I'm out of here. I'm taking off. I want no part of this. We do have some things we're going to get into today. Specifically, we're going to do a double edition of One Big Question. We're going to be taking a look at the remainder of the Eastern Conference. We'll knock out the remaining 10 teams and talk about one big question for each of them. Teams like the Orlando Magic, the Heat, the Hawks, Keith's Celtics. We'll talk about them, the 76ers, the Knicks, and more. So lots of questions we're going to dive into for each of these teams. Keith, kind of excited. I know we've got kind of a slow. This is the calm before the storm. You know, once we get to media day and all of that, like everything's going to go crazy. It's going to be like drinking from the fire hose in terms of NBA news. So we've got the calm before the storm right now, and I'm kind of excited that we get a chance to devote a whole show to one big question.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. There's just, there's not a lot going on right now. A lot of camp signing, shuffling in and out guys, mostly designed around getting their affiliate player rights for the G League and the like. We're not going to break all those down because we'd be doing hundreds of those. So I'll say this, shout out too. If you're a fan of a certain team and you're interested, guaranteed somebody who covers that team has done a video on that team's like exhibit 10 guys and the like, including, I know you guys have done that over on Lakers Nation because especially with Christian Coloco, you get a really interesting one there. But yeah, we figured let's get into it and really focus and devote our time to the one big question there. I'm also going to say this. When you say drinking from the fire hose, it always makes me think of the movie UHF with Weird Al.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that one? I don't know if you ever saw
it. It has been so long. I mean, that came out in the early 80s, something like that, the mid 80s,
probably late 80s. I think if I had to guess. But yeah, I remember Michael Richards. Is that his name? The guy who played Kramer.
Yeah.
Is like the main star, and he's like, that means you get to drink from the fire hose. And he puts the kid on the little rocking horse and then blasts him in the face with a fire hose at full power.
And
shoots him off. Yeah, man, that's a good time with that. So yeah, that's what I always think of when somebody says we're drinking from the fire hose. Let's see, UHF film, 1989.
89. You were right, late 80s. Okay, all right. Yep. I need to find that clip then, because the comedy involving kids and slapstick humor is always fantastic. I always think of was it Billy Madison with the dodgeball scene?
Yes, yes. Now you're all in big trouble.
That's right.
Yep.
There's been some stuff that's come out about that after the fact that he was really chucking the ball at those kids. Oh, those kids were good sports, I guess.
Although he goes, I'm out. And the teacher's like, that just means to the next game. Recess is Miss Lippy's time.
Oh, no. We're going to go down a path of old movies here.
Eyes. Oh, Billy Madison. Great
That's a good one.
film.
That's a good one. And may God have mercy on your soul.
That is an all-timer.
That's an all-time.
I like using that one when somebody sends a really long Twitter message that is just nonsense. I love saying at no time in your incoherent rant.
Did you come anywhere close to what could be considered a something thought?
Rational thought.
Award you no points and may God have mercy on your soul.
Right, well, this has been Trevor Keith Talk 80s, 90s movies.
Right? Yeah. Midway through this, I do have some scheduled nonsense I need to ask you about. So let's get it before we lose all the people that are saying just talk NBA already. Let's get into this. Let's start here. We'll start with your hometown here. Let me put the title on. There we go. Southeast Division. Let's start with the Orlando Magic. Well, I guess the way we've done all the other divisions, is this how you imagine it's going to finish up? Orlando, Miami, Atlanta, Charlotte, Washington, in that order.
Yes, only because I don't think the Heat are going to push overly hard in the regular season. So I think Orlando will probably finish atop the division again. And then I do think Charlotte will be closer to Atlanta this year. I'm high on Charlotte. Let's not get crazy with where I'm at with the Hornets, but I do think they'll challenge for the play-in tournament this year. And then I think Washington may be if not the worst team in the league, they're certainly going to be in the running for that.
All right, so I'm in agreement. I think it's going to finish in this same order, which maybe isn't as exciting as some of the other divisions, but some really good teams here. Let's kick things off with the Magic. Keith, you go first. What's your big question for Orlando?
Yeah, it's the same as it's been for a couple years now. Do they have enough shooting? They added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The idea of him and Jalen Suggs as a backcourt together is tremendous. That defensively, at least, that is, for my money, that's one of the best defensive backcourts in the entire NBA. Caldwell-Pope is also a very good shooter, so that should help quite a bit there. He's in effect replacing Markelle Fultz, who started for a lot of last season, as far as Fultz was the starter early. Then the Magic went back to Gary Harris as the starter, and Fultz came off the bench after his injury. But Caldwell-Pope, that's the guy he's replacing on the roster. So pretty big upgrade there. Not as good of an on-ball creator, but the Magic had plenty of that with Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Cole Anthony. Jalen Suggs has grown into his role as an on-ball guy. They even run some stuff through Wendell Carter as a distributor out at the top of the key. So you've got plenty of guys that should be able to create offense. It's just going to be the shooting. If Caldwell-Pope can shoot, and if Franz Wagner can refine his jumper, then the Magic are going to be pretty good. They're going to be a really tough out. If those things happen, Orlando's going to compete for a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference and home court advantage. If those things don't happen, the Magic are probably going to be, again, they'll be a playoff team, but it'll be in the back half of the conference, and they'll face the tough road, having to play on the road in the first round, second round, and beyond.
Okay, I think you're right. I think the shooting is the number one question for this team. So I'm going to jump over to a guy that is, maybe he's under the radar right now a little bit more than he should be. 23, 7, and 5.5 for Paulo Banchero last season. Like, I think people don't realize the season he had. That's phenomenal. That's incredible numbers. You mentioned the shooting. Can he get his 3-point shooting up just to 34% 3-point shooter? He gets that 36, 37%. This guy's going to be really, really difficult to stop. I'm wondering, he was an all-star last season. Do we get a year 3 leap from Paulo Banchero? Does he take even that next step forward? Because if he does, we could be talking about a bona fide NBA superstar here with the numbers that he's putting up. And Keith, I think this is bigger than just Orlando. This is bigger than the Magic. When we look into the next iteration of Team USA, I think Paulo Banchero is going to have to be a big, big part of it. You're losing guys like LeBron, like Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. These guys are starting to age out. And I think Paulo Banchero is one of the young players that they're looking to be a backbone for Team USA moving forward. So I'm expecting big things from him this season. I think this is the year he finally ascends. So my big question, though, is does he truly break through and become a top tier, well, maybe not top tier, but say a top 15-esque superstar in the NBA next season? Because I think that is in the realm of possibility for Paulo Banchero.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's coming, whether it's this year or the year after. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the bar you're setting is like, is he in the mix for all NBA? Right.
Yes. The great way to put it. Yes. I should have said
that. If he's in the mix for all NBA, then sure. Then the Magic are in a little bit of a different place moving forward here. So I'm really excited for that. One thing I'm looking for with him, I want to see him individually rebound a little bit better. That he should probably be around 10 rebounds per game, in my opinion. Now, the Magic are a very good defensive rebounding. They're a very good rebounding team, period, but really good defensive rebounding. They were, I believe, 3rd in defensive rebound rate a season ago. That's part of why they're such a good defensive team. They rarely ever foul, and they rebound the ball. If you can do those two things, you're probably going to be a pretty good defensive team, unless you're getting scored on all the time, which they were not. So I think that is going to be a key thing for him. Just bump that up a little bit. And it might not be the worst thing in the world for the Magic if his assists went down a little bit, because that would mean somebody else is stepping up and taking on a little bit of that playmaking burden. But I think it's fine. They did not pursue the traditional point guards that a lot of people mentioned last year via trade or via free agent signing, because they believe in Paulo and Franz, and as well as those two guys, Jalen Suggs, in the kind of the bump he took as a playmaker. So yeah, things are very bright here in Orlando. This is as excited people have been locally about the team since the Dwight Howard years, which we're talking basically a decade ago at this point. So we're really into a spot where people are excited about this team. They like that these guys are young, and the most important thing, all of these guys really want to be here in Orlando. They talk about it regularly. A lot of them have made this their year-round home base, and even the ones who didn't, they were in town quite a bit, playing pickup and all that. So this is a team that's really excited to get back to it. And yeah, I'm with you on Paulo for Team USA too. He's going to be somebody we're going to need in the future, being a big part of whatever we're building on the international stage.
All right, let's jump over to the Miami Heat. You kick things off with Orlando, so I'll kick things off for Miami. And my big question for them, it's what happens with Jimmy Butler? What happens with this contract? We know that he made some noise over the offseason about maybe I'll go to Philly. Maybe I'll now we're hearing, well, Jimmy really likes Brooklyn. Maybe Golden State gets into the mix. There's going to be teams that are interested in trading for Jimmy Butler, but you look at his contract, player option next year. That means he can be a free agent potentially this summer. The Miami Heat had some interesting comments about him. Pat Riley had some interesting comments about the number of games he played this past season and in general. And at 35 years old, do you really want to commit a max salary to Jimmy Butler? It's a fair question. So I know we're going to focus a lot on what the Miami Heat do on the court, but given how important Jimmy Butler is to this team, what happens with him this season and beyond is going to be a huge, huge plot line for the team until this is resolved one way or another.
Feels like this is I don't want to say make or break season for the Heat, but it feels like this is the last run for this core group. Because if, let's say it's a similar type season, they win in the mid 40s, they're a lower half seed, they have to go through the play-in tournament, and they're out in the first round, they're going to make major changes. I think you're going to see Jimmy Butler and Duncan Robinson and maybe even Tyler Hero, maybe even Terry Rozier in his partially guaranteed contract. All those guys, I think, are going to get moved, and we're going to see this Miami team look very, very different after this comes through. It'll be, all right, we're rebuilding around Bam Adebayo and the younger guys. I mean, Hawkins Jr., Nikola Jovic, those will be some of the guys. Khalil Ware, we'll build around those guys. And if we trade off some of these other guys, it's fine. We're doing it to fully reset. So I just think we've kind of gotten to that point a little bit with Miami, right? Where it's like, but what are we doing? It's kind of time, right? We've got to one way or the other here. So that means my big question is, can these guys stave that off? Meaning, can they play well enough to kind of keep that from being a thing that just ends up happening? What happens with these guys, and do they play enough? I mean, clearly Pat Riley was frustrated because the famous call out was Jimmy Butler, that he called out like, hey, you can't be talking about the playoffs and how it went and didn't go if you're not out there playing in the games. But he also called out Tyler Hero last off right at the end of the season, beginning of the off season too, for being kind of consistently hurt, saying like, hey, we need this guy on the court. You need to be out there. So I think he's kind of tired of, hey, I'm over the guys playing 50 games a year and then being hurt come playoff time. So I feel like we've reached the end of I was reading some stuff about like the Voyager probe and all that. I don't know if you saw they're like, it's still going, years later, like Voyager
and there's
1
two of them
still out there. Yeah. But the original Voyager 1 still going out there. They're still like, it's still sending back data. It's like way, way out there in space. But like the term that they keep using is it's way past the end of its predicted life. Like, I think we're kind of there with the Heat. They're way past the end of their predicted life here. See, I brought it around. You were like, where's he going with this voyage?
So the Miami Heat are going to float off into the endless void of space, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And we come up the road a piece to Orlando and get launched off into space.
There you go.
Central Florida.
I won't go into this now because we have enough nonsense to get into already. But if you guys, if what Keith is mentioning, what he's referencing, it's actually really cool when you look at the Voyager program and you look at what what it's done and kind of what the goal was of the mission and everything. Something cool to go check out, like just the information that we decided to include. Like, should alien life forms come across these things, like in order to represent what humanity is all about? And these were sent decades and decades ago. Were the 70s? I think that they were actually sent
Yeah. I
off
think
into space.
77 it went up or something
Yeah,
like that.
very, very cool
Yeah.
stuff. So anyway, but Google is your friend. Go check them out if you have not. All right, let's go to the Atlanta Hawks. I went first on the Heat. So Keith, you're up here on Atlanta with one big question.
Yeah, this one's going to be really general for me. It's just kind of like, where are we going with the Hawks? It feels like this is a team that's very much in transition. We saw the DeJounte Murray trade happen. Trae Young's still here. When I look at the Hawks, if I just kind of start going through the guys on the roster, it's a lot of, oh, I like him. I like him too. Oh, I like that guy. And by the end, I'm like, why don't I like the Hawks more? I just kind of don't like all the guys together that they have. So this is going to be a big, I think, find out year. Is Jalen Johnson, is the leap he took last year, is that sustainable and going to continue forward into being a big time player? Is, where does DeAndre Hunter fit long term with Zachary Sachet in the fold? Is it finally time for a Kongwu to take over for Capella? I apologize if I'm stealing some of your thoughts here, but it's just, with these guys, where are we going with this team overall? And I think this year is, let's find out. I think they'll probably be in the mix to make the play-in tournament. But yeah, I think there's just as much chance we hit mid-season trade deadline and a bunch of these guys are in play to be moved, because the Hawks are like, all right, we're gonna get off some of this long-term salary, move off of some more money here, and see what this team looks like as they build it forward with Sachet and Johnson being the guys they're building with around Trae Young.
It feels like to me the Hawks are a mediocre kind of meh season away from really needing to pick a direction here and making a tough choice. And we saw, the Brooklyn Nets be in that position over the summer, and they ultimately decided, okay, we're going to move on from Bridges and we're going to build for the future. I do wonder if that's a decision that we see the Hawks make. But for me, my for this season, my big question is what happens with Clint Capella? He's been a big part of this team. You brought him up a moment ago. He's been a big part of this team in the past. The heir apparent is right there. Okongwu's, he's 24 years old. They've got him on a good contract. They're probably going to want to hand the reins over to him. And I do think that there is a market for bigs, maybe a market that didn't exist in prior seasons. And you look at the teams out there right now that could really use a center. Now, I'm not saying all of them would be willing to give up the kind of players and assets and salaries in order to match Clint Capella at $22 million and change, but the Knicks need another center. We know that. The Pelicans, my goodness, do they need a center? And they've got Brandon Ingram to trade. Maybe, we heard the Hawks were resistant to do something like that, but maybe there's something with a third team or something there. The Lakers could use another center. There's a bunch of clubs right now that could use a big, and in years past, we haven't really seen this market. So I do look at, between now and the trade deadline, do the Hawks maybe not trigger a full rebuild and say we're just committing to young players, but is there a way to rebalance this roster a bit? And could a Capella trade be a big part of doing that? I don't think that would be the only move you would need to make. Maybe you move off of DeAndre Hunter as well. But I do look at Capella as a guy who is probably going to be in higher demand this season than we've seen in seasons past, just based on the market deficiency where you've got so many teams that need a big man. And I'm hoping for Atlanta's sake that they can take advantage of that and make a move here with an expiring contract in Capella. I think Okongwu is their guy moving forward. So why not strike where the iron is hot, get something good for Capella, and hopefully something that will at least give you clarity in terms of your future direction, either send you another young talent or maybe a piece that just will fit a bit better for them for the long-term future.
Yeah, I think those are the decisions you need to make. Even a guy like Larry Nance Jr. What's his long-term future in Atlanta? Probably not much of one, but still a helpful guy. Somebody I think teams they're not going to give up a ton for him, but you could, just return a little bit better of an asset for you in your long-term build out with this team. I could see that being a thing that happens. And then I think what's going to be really interesting, and I'll spoil a little bit of piece I'm working on for Spot Track. It's roster and rotation battles with teams. I'm very curious to see who else starts on this team, because I think Capella still starts, Young still starts. I think Hunter and Johnson start. So then that becomes, does someone out of Daniels or Risache eventually beat out Bogdan Bogdanovic? I think Bogdan Bogdanovic will still be the better player all year long, but I think at age 32, they've got him for a couple more seasons. I think Atlanta would like to maybe transition him back into the 6-man role where it is, hey, we could just keep a little bit of wear and tear off him. He play 20 to 25 minutes a night instead of 30 minutes a night. But that means either Daniels or Risache needs to be ready to step in to take on that 2-guard spot, the other wing spot, however you want to call it out there in Atlanta. And I think that's going to be something worth kind of keeping an eye on there. With that piece will come out maybe tomorrow, but probably some point next week as we're getting ready for camps to open. So people can look for more thoughts. But those are the kind of fun little roster battles we're looking at right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bogdanovic will have some trade value if they decide to really pivot here. He'll be an interesting guy to keep an eye on. But all right, let's jump over to the next team. I'm just going to start calling them your Charlotte Hornets, Keith. I know you're high on this team. The Hornets, it's my turn to go first here. So I guess I'm just going to start with the head of the snake here, and that's LaMelo Ball. What is he the guy? Is he the piece that you want to build around moving forward? Is he the guy that's going to become a star? Because that is going to dictate everything else on this Hornets roster. There's a lot of other players that are interesting, other players to talk about. I'm sure you've got plenty to say on some of those guys. But for me, this team needs to figure out what is LaMelo Ball. I know he's dealt with a lot of injuries, but is this guy a 1A star, or do you think he can be that or not? Because that's going to determine a lot of their decision-making here moving forward. So what happens with LaMelo Ball this season? What does it look like with him at the helm? And do the Hornets finally say, yes, this is just our guy and we are locked in here on LaMelo Ball, or not? And then what's the decision-making process once you get to that point? That's my big question for the Hornets.
And I think that all starts with him being healthy, right? He's got to play 60, 70 games this coming season for them to really get that answer. I bet if you poured truth serum into the Hornets, they would love if they, at the end of this season, knew Brandon Miller is our best player. Because I think that's where we're headed. I think Brandon Miller is going to be their best player. I hand up, I thought the Hornets should have taken Scoot Henderson with the number 2 pick last year. I still think Scoot Henderson's going to be very good, but I was a little too low on Brandon Miller. He showed me so much last year, especially after Ball went down, because he was able to create a lot of his own shots and get a lot of good looks himself. He really does remind me of like Paul George quite a bit with his ability to create off the dribble for himself and also, find some passes and the like. So my big thing with the Hornets, my big question is, can they get the right guys to play enough together? And at the end of the year, they can really start to say, all right, this is what we've got. These are the guys we know are our guys going forward that we're going to build around. These other guys, they're here for now. They're just placeholders. Big guy for that, Mark Williams. Again, got to be healthy. I love Mark Williams' potential, but we got to have him on the floor. What does it look like with Miles Bridges, Ball, Miller, Green, Josh Green coming in all together? If you look at the Hornets roster and you just go up and down, you're probably going to be like, man, they've got a lot of guys that can kind of play in their top, 8-man rotation here. And that's before you get into some of their more prospect guys like Tejan Salon and Nick Smith Jr. So there's a lot of guys who can play here. So my big thing is let's get them all healthy enough that we can start to sort some of this out around these. Is Mark Williams a guy who can anchor a defense enough that it offsets what LaMelo Ball is lacking defensively? Does that, is that okay? What does it look like when you're playing just more kind of normal basketball throughout the course of the year? I've already said it. I think the Hornets are going to challenge for a play-in tournament spot this year, because I think they will get healthy, and I like the talent on this team. And I think Charles Lee, Jeff Peterson, the new coach, new front office executive, brought a new energy to the team. I'm excited about what Charlotte's building there.
I think it can be massively improved from last season. I'm going to hold back, have a little bit of reservation on whether or not they can actually make the play-in tournament. but I will say it's not out of the question. They do have talent. They do have talent, but we'll see if they can put it all together.
Let
all
me
right, let's
also
jump.
say this real
Yeah.
quick. Sorry to interrupt you before
No,
you
you're
go to
good.
the Wizards. It's not like a major accomplishment to make the East play in tournament. Like, I'll just be completely
Fair.
honest. Like, somebody has to be team 10, right? Like,
Somebody's
someone
falling
has to
backwards
get
into
in
it.
there. So, like, yeah, when I say they may be there, fine if they are. I mean, for a little while, that was a playing tournament. I felt like it was going to be the Hornets and Hawks, like invitational every year in the East, because it just felt like that's where they're going to live. But still, I'd still think that would be a kind of a fun accomplishment, even if I'm sure there are Hornets fans right now like, man, we want to be bad one more year and get one more guy out of this loaded draft that's coming in, and then we can, push forward. And if that happens, fine. It's an outcome. Let's just play more normal basketball and not have the whole season ruined by injuries. Let's just get a real sense for the guys we have.
All right, let's jump over to the Washington Wizards. And I believe it's to you here, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, this one for me comes down to how quickly do they pivot to you're not a part of whatever we're building and you're either out of here or you're on the bench. And that is, man, I went full Boston with that one. That was, it came out there. But that's the question, right? How long before Kyle Kuzma, Malcolm Brogdon, Jonas Valanciunas, Jordan Poole, Rashawn Holmes, whose contract was fully designed to be tradable, how long before those guys are either traded or they're on the bench and we're just going full kids? Is that Christmas? Is that trade deadline? It's going to be at some point this season. It's going to be very quick that they pivot into playing the kids. Not a criticism, not the wrong thing to do. It's just that's where this team is headed.
Yeah, that's it exactly. This team it's a mess. There's a few interesting players, but obviously everybody knows this is about the future, and there's a few players on the team right now that are clearly not part of that future. Jonas Valanciunas, it's a very poorly kept secret that they signed him to trade him. At some point, he's going to be moved. I don't know if it'll be this season, could be next season. Same thing again with Rashawn Holmes. You look at his contract. At some point, do they move off of Jordan Poole? I don't know if they'll find a lot of takers, but I don't know that they're looking at him and saying this guy's part of our future. What's that?
Yeah, they'd like to.
They'd like to. I mean, that's. Yeah. But I'm sure they're not looking at him and thinking this guy's a guy we're building around. Kyle Kuzma is somehow already 29. Like for as many guys as we look at, we're like, Gary Trent Jr. has been in the NBA for 15 years and is still only 26. Kyle Kuzma is 20. Kyle Kuzma is going to be 30 before we know it. That feels crazy. I know he was an older rookie coming in, but still, there's some players on this team. Malcolm Brogdon, of course, sticks out like a sore thumb. 32 years old. There's some moves here to make. I'll tell you what this Wizards team is, Keith. So last night, my daughter, we were working on this little craft that she was doing. And I said, well, where are your markers? Why don't you just go into your craft cabinet and get them? And she said, oh, we can't. I said, why? Why can't you go in there? She said, well, because everything started to fall and I just closed the doors. Go, how long ago was that? Like a week ago. So now, because as soon as we open the doors, all these craft supplies are going to fall out. I said, so your plan was just to never open the craft cabinet ever again? And she said, yeah. I said, well, you can't do that. At some point, you have to open the cabinet and just clean it up and address the problem. That's the Wizards right now. At some point, they've got to just let everything spill out. They've got to truly address the problem, clean it up, and then start fresh. And that's where I think this team is. And that's going to require Malcolm Brogdon being moved, Kyle Kuzma probably being moved, and then you truly start over. But I know it's been a while for Washington since they've seen, a good basketball team, but I do think that this team needs to refresh things, just deal with the craft cabinet, open it. You can't keep those doors just held shut any longer.
I love it because I think the Wizards, when they tried to Bradley Beal a year ago, they really set down a path of we're starting over, right? We are gonna do this, but that doesn't mean we're just gonna shed every talented guy and let them all walk away. Meaning a guy like Kyle Kuzma, we got him on a value contract. Why wouldn't we re-sign him, right? We're not just gonna let him walk. And then I think Valanciunas, I agree with you. I do think they'll trade him, but I think their initial thing was we don't want to have to start Alex Sarr day one as like basically this big skinny rookie who's just going to get beat up. I think they want to give him time to adjust and figure out the NBA a little bit. I also think with a guy like Valanciunas, we know in the NBA one thing still holds true: rookies get beat on. But their teams are going to drop Sarr, and I think they like the idea of when you come in and you drop our guy, guess what? Valanciunas is going to pay it right back to you on the other end of the floor. He will take your guy down if you do it to our guy. So let's all be a little more sensible here. But yeah, I mean, I think they're building a really nice core group with Sarr and Coulibaly and Bob Carrington. I think that's going to be a really fun kind of trio to watch. I think they can all play together. I think a big success will be how long before Bob Carrington can play primary minutes as the main on-ball point guard. You know, if that can happen really early in the season, fantastic. That either frees up trade Malcolm Brogdon or do something different. But yeah, man, they're going to be awful. Don't get me wrong, but I'm excited for this Wizards team because it felt like they've spent a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, just content to kind of sit in the middle. And as long as we're kind of around the playoffs, that's fine. We're never really going to go all in to contend, but we're never going to be bottom it out bad unless it just kind of happens. So now we're going to be bad, and then we're probably going to be bad for a little bit, but they're starting to come away with some players.
All right, let's jump over to the Atlantic Division. Before we do, Keith, I did say I had a little bit of scheduled nonsense here. And this may end up being nothing depending on your answer to this question. Did you watch Agatha All Along yet?
I watched the first episode. I did not watch the second episode yet.
Okay, so I watched them both late last night. How are you feeling so far?
It was fun. Like I we'll see with the second episode. Like I kind of get where it looks like this story's kind of going. So we'll see. Maybe there's going to be some wild twists and turns, but it was kind of fun. Like Catherine Hahn's just hilarious, and I think Aubrey Plaza is really funny too. Yeah. So I think that part has been fun so far. So it's I don't know how much this story's going to do to advance the MCU or anything like that, but for the most part, it's been kind of fun to watch it.
So I've seen both episodes. I can tell you the second episode got me even more excited for it, and it just tonally, I was like, God, when I look at the release dates, I'm like, this is going to be the perfect lead-in to Halloween. We're going to be building up, each week get a new installment, and so the second episode was something that I really liked, and so far I liked the series enough to where I went. When the second episode ended, I went, man, I wish the third one was out already so I could just watch it, So I'm in on it. I think it was pretty good. I'm curious to see what other people think. You guys can let us know in the comment section, but I'm excited for it. And I do wonder if this is by the end of this, we get like a final decision on what happened to Scarlet Witch at the end of Multiverse of Madness. Is she still around? Is she not? Because they kind of went back and forth. Like maybe she's the body. It's kind of strongly hinted that she was that body in episode 1 and everything. But then also the like, oh, is she dead thing? There's some interesting stuff going back and forth there. So maybe that will be what changes things for the MCU in general. But I just wanted to talk to you. But we'll have to talk about episode 2 when that comes out because I don't want to spoil anything for you.
Well, and also Elizabeth Olsen did come out very recently and say, like, I love the character. I would play her again if there's a story that makes sense. You know, which that also to me is that also is like, if you pay me a lot of money, sure, I'll do it again. Why not? Right?
If RDJ can get
that's exactly it.
Truck, right? Why not?
Yeah, and not to spoil Deadpool and Wolverine, but I mean it's been out for a while. What, almost 2 months now?
Streaming in a few weeks.
Yeah. So it was so fun when Chris Evans showed up and like everybody instantly went to, oh my God, Captain America's back. Like me and my daughter were so excited. And then he's like, whatever, Ryan Reynolds is like, he's going to say it. He's going to say it. And he's like, flame on. And it's his Fantastic Four character. It was just a riot. I mean, that movie, a bunch of people have been like, but it didn't do anything for the MCU as a whole. I don't care. I had fun for 2 hours just
Yeah.
watching that movie. Like at some point, that's, like I've said before, I'm a pretty simple guy. Just like, show me superheroes beating up bad guys and blow some stuff up and, have some fun. Like I'm in. I would just want to turn my brain off for a couple hours.
Yep, that's it exactly. That's it exactly. All right, let's get into the Atlantic Division. Keith, we've got your Celtics, the Knicks, the Sixers, the Nets, and the Raptors. Is this how you think it's going to finish? It was that order last season.
Flip-flop the Raptors and the Nets. And I think
agree.
the Nets will be the worst team in the NBA this season. I think they will have the worst record in the entire NBA this season, and I think it's completely by design, and I don't think it's going to bother them in the slightest
It's a
if
positive.
they are the worst team in the league. So flip-flop the Raptors and the Nets, chop off 10, 12 wins off the Nets, give a couple of those to the Raptors.
20 wins for the Nets on the season?
Yeah, probably right around there, and that might even be a little high. It might only be, they might be down in like the 15 to 18 range. So yeah, you give a couple of those wins to the Raptors. Did they challenge a little bit for that 10th spot in the East play-in tournament? And there we go. But yeah, I do think this will be the order. I think it'll be a lot closer. I don't think the Celtics are going to push quite as hard. And I think the Knicks and the Sixers will be a lot better this season. And so the standings will be closer, but ultimately, yeah, I think that is how it finishes.
Lowest win total last season was the Detroit Pistons with 14. Next was the Washington Wizards with 15. So that, I mean, if the Nets really are the low win total and they're at 20, that would actually be a big step up compared to last season, but they may win even less than that. I mean, this is a team that's not put together to win, but that's okay. If I'm a Nets fan, I'm more excited now than I was a couple of months ago, even when I would have said, well, maybe they're going to win 30-ish games this next season or something like that. This team has a much brighter future now than they did a few months ago. But all right, let's start at the top here. Let's start with your Boston Celtics. I guess for me, because I'll start off on this one, since I'm sure you've got plenty to say here. But I guess for me, the big question is there a championship hangover? And that's kind of I know we can get into, the ins and outs of this roster and everything, but this roster is awesome. You've got guys who are two-way players on all over the court. You've got guys that can shoot. You've got guys who can dribble. They can pass. They can do a little bit of everything. They can play a lot of different styles. Sure, we can talk about Al Horford's age and all of that. But for me, the big question is, last season, they were pushing that championship, pushing to prove themselves, and they got the job done. Is there a sense this season to push down on the gas pedal? Or is it more, okay, been there, done that, get us to the playoffs, let's fast forward, and maybe we see a Celtics team that isn't as engaged during the regular season, and does that lower their win total? In my mind, would not decrease their championship odds at all, but do they put less emphasis on winning games in the regular season, and instead you kind of get to the midpoint of the season, they're like, all right, we're bored. Can we fast forward to March, April, May yet? Let us know. So that's my big question for them. Do they fall victim to the championship hangover, and does that lower actually their performance during the regular season?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think once you've climbed the mountain, it's hard to say, let's go back and climb that mountain all over again a year later. Yeah. So you do it, maybe you do still do it, but you're not going to push up there. It's quite as hard as you did. I think one of the things with the Celtics has been, or at least last year, was they avoided like the really bad losses. Like for the most part, they stayed pretty focused throughout the course of last season. They had a couple games where they threw games away because they basically said, yeah, we're just not going to play guys, and toss games away, which every good team does at some point. But for the most part, they stayed pretty focused and locked in. My big question for them is, what happens with the big man rotation while Porzingis is out? They're saying December. Well, December is, there's a 31 days in December. I don't know that I would not be banking on December 1st. I'd bank a lot closer to December 31st for him to be back than I would the first, just because they're not going to push him back, not with his injury history and the team's goals. And as we all saw in the finals, his importance to the team and what they look like when they have him and they're kind of a full, fully functional team there with him in the fold. Al Horford will be fine. I'm not really worried about him, but I also don't want Al Horford playing 30 minutes a night from October forward. I would like to see that be, you know what, if it costs you a win or two, but you keep Miles off of him and you play Xavier Tillman and Luke Cornett and Nehemiah Queta, fine. Who cares? Like that's more important that Al Horford is ready to go when we get to the end of the season than it is winning one or two extra regular season games because you pushed really through. Other than that, I know people are going to say this guy's so cocky about it. I just don't have a lot of questions because the team's exactly the same team as we saw last year, minus a couple guys at the end of the bench. So run it back for the most part. Yeah, let's go. Let's see what it looks like. I don't think there's any thought to right now. We got to think about breaking this team up because they're so expensive and all that. That's more of a year or two, probably more like 2 or 3 away from being a real question. So I think it's just, let's do it. But to your point, how much is there we just got to get through the regular season attitude? What does that look like? I will say, I think they're good enough that they had a 14-game lead in the division. So you chop, 7 games off. I don't know that that's fine. Like you still win the division by a healthy margin. So I'm not sure, but I think mid to high 50s and wins. And, then it's just from there, it's how much better do the other teams get?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's jump over to the New York Knicks. And Keith, you're up on a busy Knicks team from this past summer. Maybe the biggest trade of the summer too, landing Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, the easy question here would be, what are they going to do at backup center? But I'm going to flip it. Tom Thibodeau, and we haven't talked about this on the show yet, he said recently, Julius Randle, he'll play him more at the 5.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's going to, my big question is he going to follow through on that? Or is it one of those things where he does it, it doesn't look good for like 5 minutes one night, and then we never see it again? Because he's like, nope, I'm going back to a traditional rim protecting big man, and that's it. Because if he can get 5 to 10 minutes a game out of Julius Randle at the 5, oh boy, that changes things in such a good, positive way for the Knicks. And I heard Zach Lowe made a really good point about this, that people in the league have been saying OG Anunoby can play up and can even defend some of the smaller 5s. So if you can keep Randle out of having to do that and keep him on his more traditional matchup, but you're kind of nominally he's the 5, oh man, dude, now you opened up a bunch of stuff. And there are all kinds of offensive options you can go there. You could go super duper switchable with like Bridges and Anunoby and Hart all out there together. What does this look like? That for me is, will Tibbs do it and will he stay committed to it? That becomes the biggest question to me with the Knicks, because they've got everything else you could need to be a really good team that's in contention in the East.
No, that's a fantastic point. Tom Thibodeau did say, because I talked about this on the basketball bulletin a little bit, he did say, like, he said, I wouldn't want to put too much of that burden on Randle. I'm paraphrasing, but because it starts to wear on him. And then he said, like 10 to 15 minutes a night. I went 10 to 15 minutes a night at the 5 for Julius Randle. That's like, I know to Tom Thibodeau, that's light lifting, but that's a significant amount of time. That's full backup center minutes, 10 to 15 minutes a night at the 5. And so if you go ahead and do that, I do think it opens up a lot of possibilities for the Knicks. If you dig into their advanced metrics, it's a tiny, I'm talking about minuscule sample size. But when you pull Julius Randle at center, the Knicks have actually been really, really good. Again, smallest of sample sizes, so who knows whether there's truth in that or not. But still, I think Julius Randle at the 5 is something that they're going to absolutely need to experiment with here on this Knicks side. I guess for me, I will kind of lean into the backup center thing here, and it kind of ties into the Randle bit, because if Randle is successful at the 5, is that enough to where you say, okay, we don't need to go get a big now? But just given the history of Mitchell Robinson, I still think that the Knicks need to go find another center. Their superpower, we've talked about this, it's their ability to absolutely bludgeon teams on the glass. That's not to say Julius Randle can't be a big rebounding presence, but the way you really have an advantage there is when you've got Julius Randle plus like an Isaiah Hartenstein on the floors, or a Mitchell Robinson or someone like that. So if you can get another big in, even if maybe they're the team that goes and lands Jonas Valanciunas or something like that, or Nick Richards or whoever, you can continue to build upon that strength that you have on the glass. I also think it's interesting when you look at the Knicks. One of the things they were able to do was not just be a great offensive rebounding team, in fact, the best in the NBA in offensive rebound percentage, but they were also able to be a middle of the pack team in terms of transition defense, taking away transition opportunities. We've seen coaches over the last
Hard to
decade or
do.
so, which is difficult to do. And we've seen coaches oftentimes pick one or the other. Darvin Ham infamously did it with the Lakers last year, just punted on offensive rebounds. So we're not going to bother going after him much. Everybody get back. Unfortunately, they still sucked at transition defense. They were one of the worst in the NBA. But we've seen coaches have more that kind of mentality. The Knicks, I think, represent a new wave of no, offensive rebounding still can be a weapon, and we can prevent our transit. We can find ways, if we do it right, to be able to be a force on the glass without necessarily just hemorrhaging points in transition. So I'm going to be curious to see how can they perpetuate that, particularly now that they don't have Isaiah Hartenstein in there to help them do that. I think he was a big piece to that too. So again, I know it's the easy answer is looking at what they do at backup center, but I do think it ties into so much of what this team is.
It's a great call out. I love the offensive rebounding call out. And a big part of that was when Robinson was healthy, and then when the Hartenstein was in there, when Robinson wasn't. Those guys are almost one-man offensive rebounding machines. So you don't have to commit 2 or 3 going to the glass. You can just get it done with one, and then the others can track back. I think so. That's huge. I don't know how many people fully realize the Knicks were a better offensive team than defensive team a year ago. Because you combined an out of this world offensive rebounding rate as a team, like you called out, best in the league, and you put that against pretty good 3-point shooting at a pretty good clip. I think they were about 10th or 11th in 3-point rate, if I remember right, in the league. Yeah, they were 11th in 3-point rate. That's good stuff. And for a team that was dead last in the league in pace, dead last, that's how they put up points, and that's how they put together a pretty good offense, because they played fairly slow, but you got up a lot of 3-pointers and you went and chased them down when you missed them. And that's how you make up for a team that is, at times, it's a lot of Jalen Brunson and not a whole heck of a lot else. Now, what's nice is Randall did a really good job before he got hurt saying, yeah, I've been the all-star, I've been the all-NBA guy, but this is Jalen Brunson's team. I'm going to play off him. He'll make the game easier for me. And Julius Randle is a phenomenal secondary creator, because he's really good at putting the ball on the floor, finding a mismatch, attacking it, finding a shooter. Really does a nice job with that. Now you've added Mikal Bridges, who has seeded being the primary offensive weapon on a team. When he's healthy, he's going to be the third guy. Maybe even at times, if you're like trying to get DiVincenzo going or trying to get Anunoby going, he may be like the fourth guy. Now, all of a sudden, you've really built out your offensive versatility without sacrificing any of your defense, because you added a guy who's still one of the better wing defenders in the league. So all around, man, I love this team. They're going to be really, really tough. I think they are as much as anybody built to bother the Celtics in a lot of ways, just because of their size across the board. That's one of the things Boston kills teams with, is they don't really play anybody who's really small for their position outside of Peyton Pritchard. Other than that, it's everybody else's pretty good size and or wingspan for their positions. So that's going to be something that the Knicks are clearly, they know Boston's the team to go through. So they built a team that's designed to try to give them as much trouble as you can get.
All right, let's jump over to the Philadelphia 76ers. Extra emphasis on Philadelphia. Apparently they are indeed staying despite I don't know how much, if there was any real teeth to that threat about, going to New Jersey or whatnot, but sounds like they are going to be staying in Philly. They'll get a new building there. They'll get a new arena. The 76ers, for me, obviously, I think they did get the biggest free agent addition of the offseason by landing Paul George. I mean, that was a big, big deal to get him away from the Clippers. I think my question, and I think this is all going to fit just fine, but until we see it, how do Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid all coexist, given that for all 3 of them, the offensive side of the ball is really where they make their impact. I think it can fit very well. I'm not too concerned about it, but that synergy between the three of them is going to determine how far the 76ers team goes. And that, I think, is the big question for them. How do we, is it a lot of kind of your turn, my turn? Is Joel Embiid, is Paul George used to cutting off of a big? Is he able to make some cuts off of Embiid? How do those two combine? Tyrese Maxey, how do you make sure that while, yes, Paul George is here, Tyrese Maxey is an exciting young star in his own right? How do we make sure that his impact doesn't get minimized, that it's not all Tyrese Maxey standing off ball and Paul George is doing his thing on ball or vice versa? That dynamic, I think, is going to be a big question for the 76ers. I think they will work through it, but it's something I'm keeping an eye on in the early days of the season.
Yeah, I'm not going to dance around mine. Are Joel Embiid and Paul George going to be healthy when the playoffs start and then be healthy throughout? Because if they're not, none of the other questions we can have matter. Because if they don't have both of those guys healthy, they're not going to go where they want to go as a team. I like what they did this offseason. I think they had a really solid group. I think they did really great work putting together this roster. I do think Paul George will fit in nicely. I have a couple questions about what happens when Tyrese Maxey, who is an ascendant star in this league, is now back to being the third banana. What does that look like? Because Embiid and George are going to be the first and second options. What does that look like? But I think, Tyrese Maxey he'll be fine. I think what we'll see is he'll take a real leap as a playmaker this year, because we know what he can do as a scorer. Then so health is the clear, obvious one.
Sure.
But if I'm going to go with something else other than that, it becomes, do they have enough size outside of Embiid and Drummond? Because what happens when you play teams with wings that can punish you? Again, I'll go to Boston. Big part of their success is Tatum and Brown this past season just started bullying guys repeatedly, would get to where they wanted to go because you need to put wings with real size or actual size on the floor. They took all the way late into the summertime to sign Gershon Yabusele, who's like the only real power forward on the roster.
Yeah, he is.
But what does it look like, right? You could get away with some combination of George and Martin and Oubre and Caleb Martin, that is, not KJ Martin, even though I still kind of like KJ Martin. But then even the backcourt is kind of small for them with Lowry and Maxey and Gordon and Jackson. So it's just, do they have enough size? What is that going to look like as this plays out over the course of a long season? And is that something that's going to lead to maybe some health issues? We've seen some of these guys miss considerable time in previous seasons beyond Embiid and George. And part of that becomes it's wear and tear of, all right, Embiid got pulled out to the perimeter. Now who's going to step up and challenge a shot at the rim out of that other group? Or is it going to be, just kind of let them go because we don't want you doing that because we need you on the floor on the other end for other stuff. So I like what they have, but I do have a couple question marks. That's why I've got them like a tick behind the Knicks. I think I trust the Knicks to be there a little bit more than the Sixers. But man, this Sixers team, if they get to the postseason and Embiid and George are ready to go, they're going to be a really tough out, simply because talent wins out more often than not.
Yeah, they're going to be difficult to deal with. That's a good call by you two on the power forward thing. You look down their roster, it's all threes. It's all guys who are more 3 than 4, and a bunch of those guys, with the exception, unless Yabusele is able to continue to be Olympic Yabusele, these guys are going to get the bulk of the minutes there. They'll be playing a little bit undersized at that 4 position, so that'll be something certainly to watch. All right, jumping over to the Brooklyn Nets, and I believe you're up here, Keith.
Yeah, go ahead and pull up their roster cap sheet there from Spot Track, because
it's just
my question is going
right?
to, I think, will demonstrate.
Oh, it's just a skull and crossbones. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's actually not that bad after this
it's not.
So, here's my question. While you're pulling that, there it is on the screen. And for those not watching, I'm going to say the next time the Nets are good, the best player on that team is not on this roster.
Yes.
Like that's probably not even a hot take or anything. So my question becomes, how do they navigate this season kind of with that in mind? There is not, don't get me wrong, I like Cam Thomas, but I think we kind of know at this point Cam Thomas is like the next Jordan Clarkson, Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, which is fine. I know I say this all the time and I sound like a broken record, but every time I say that, people are like, he's better than that. Is he? And does he need to be? Like, those guys have
Is
all
he
been great.
in an ideal, like on a championship team? That's really the question. On a team that's going to win 20-ish games or something, even a team that's going to win 30 games. Could he start? Sure. But on a team that's going to really go somewhere, is he a starter? Probably not. He's probably a sixth man. And again, nothing wrong with that. There's guys have made a lot of money in this league, had super long careers, and been incredibly impactful in that role. So there's no shame with that being your best skill set. And unless Cam Thomas shows us something this season that we weren't expecting, that's probably what he's ultimately going to be. And again, that's more than fine.
Sneaky bet to win the scoring title this year. If you're so inclined, he'd be a guy I'd think about maybe winning the scoring title. But do they have guys that they're really like, this is our guy that we're building around? No. I don't have any players like that. I like Day'Ron Sharpe plenty. I have already talked about him quite a bit. I like Noah Clowney a lot. Nick Claxton is not by any means like a older player or anything like that. But if you look at the roster, it's a whole lot of guys who are 28, 30 plus, handful of guys who are in their like mid-20s now, like Zaire Williams and guys like that. So it's just kind of like this team is very much a team in transition. We know guys like, start at the top. They'd trade Simmons if they could without screwing up the cap sheet too much. Claxton, we'll see what they do. I think he's young enough and on a good enough contract he could stick, but maybe he gets moved. Cam Johnson's been in trade talks for months. Bojan Bogdanovic, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder. Those guys, there's a good chance none of them are on the Nets next year. They could all very easily be by the trade deadline, I should say. They could all very easily be traded. So it's just going to lead to a little bit of a messy situation where I don't know that they're all going to be aligned on trying to win and all that. So it's just kind of who becomes like the guy that we're kind of building this around, or do we just get to get through this really messy season and then start over next year with one of the highest picks in the draft? And whoever that guy is, whether that's Cooper Flagg, or Ace Bailey, or Dylan Harper, or Nolan Traore, or VJ Edgecombe, or Liam McNeely, or whoever it is, there's one of those guys going to be somebody that they're coming out saying, this is our guy, because that's who it's going to be. That guy's just not on the roster. Just unfortunately, they're going to have to wait till the end of next June to get that guy.
So I agree with that. My big question for them, it's about Ben Simmons. Do they wind up getting something out of him? And I'm not even talking about on the court. Can you take that $40+ million expiring contract and turn him into something? Remember, he was the piece they got back in the James Harden trade. Can you get something out of him on the trade market? I'm okay with the Nets absorbing a long-term salary that's maybe not so great if they get some future assets, because that's what they should be looking to do, to add future capital. So can you take, that's one of, I don't know if that is the largest expiring in the league. Well, no, because Jimmy Butler and stuff, but Butler could be an expiring. He's got a bigger contract, but in terms of a guy that would really solely be used as an expiring contract, nobody's trading for for Ben Simmons to get Ben Simmons. What can you do with that big expiring contract? And can you make it so that you get something positive out of him rather than that $40 million just coming off your books and, well, hey, we get more cap flexibility next year? Can you turn him into something? That's the big question. Because again, it's not about what's happening so much on the court for the Nets this season. It's about the future. It's about the moves they make to plan and build for that future. And I'd like to see Ben Simmons, that big expiring contract, help become part of that future by adding other players to the roster.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I love that one because we've spent kind of the life of this show talking about teams like the Spurs and the Pacers as far as, hey, these are going to be everybody's favorite third team into every trade thing because they're sitting on a ton of cap space. Well, teams can't do that anymore. Now it's a little more complicated because of the rules around not everybody can take back more money than they send out because of various hard caps and all that with the various aprons. But there's definitely workable trades where it is Simmons is the primary piece to, hey, you're going to take on this player's salary. And we're going to get out of it. And I love that you called out that's what they have to be okay with, because you can't be looking at this saying, we're going to get one of those kids that I just rattled off, I think 5-6 names. You can't say that guy's going to turn us into a playoff team in year one. That guy's going to be like our Wembanyama and, lift us to here, because I'm just not that sold on those guys, partially in some respect because some are very much complementary players, at least early on. But so if I'm the Nets, I'm thinking I'm trying to be good 2-3 years from now. So if I was to, and I'm not saying this is an even match or something, anything would happen, but like, we got to be the ones who take on Zach LaVine's contract in this trade. Okay, we'll do it, because if you're paid properly, why not? Let's go. Let's, why not do it? So yeah, I think we're in a spot where we could definitely get there with Simmons being a part of a big trade for the Nets that instantly people, because the casual fan is going to be like, why do the Nets want this player? Like, why do the Nets want a Zach LaVine? Like, what's he going to do for them? Why does Zach LaVine want to be there? It's not about that. This is about moving money around, taking care of a team, letting them get off some bad money long-term while they pick up an additional asset or two in the form of draft picks, young players, whatever it may be.
Exactly. All right, let's finish things off with the Toronto Raptors, who may have won the competition for the best of the bad City Edition jerseys. And I can't even put that there's not even a bad category. It's an awesome jersey. But the Toronto Raptors, I'm not expecting this team to be good this year. I almost hesitated to go with this, Keith, because I feel like I've been so trade focused on a lot of my answers. But for me, when I look at this Raptors side, I just think, when are they moving Bruce Brown? We all know they picked up the option on Bruce Brown's deal specifically to trade this contract. $23 million expiring contract. He's not going to be part of the team long term. 28 years old. There's going to be teams that are interested in him. What do they find on the Bruce Brown trade market? I think that's going to be important for this Raptors team as they start to build from here. Now, he can help them in the meantime. And RJ Barrett has been pretty good as a Raptor. He's looked better as a Raptor than we saw as a Knick. Emmanuel Quickley can have his games. There's some interesting players on this team. Of course, we can't leave out Scotty Barnes. He's truly their guy who could ascend and become that star. I think this Raptors team will be better than they were last season, health willing. That's the key part here. But it does seem like Bruce Brown is the guy that they could use to really make a push and balance out this roster and maybe become like a play-in team or something like that this year. I don't know if I would say they're fully going to get there, but Bruce Brown, I think, is their clear trade chip. And I'm just curious to see what they ultimately turn him into.
Yeah, this is another version for me of somebody has to make the 10 seed in the East, right? And it's really kind of more like the 9 and 10 seed in the East, because your top 8, I think 99.9% of people are going to say are some version of Boston, New York, Philly, Milwaukee, Orlando, Cleveland, Indiana, and Miami. That's some order of those 8 teams. I think 99.9% of people are going to say. So then it becomes, as you kind of dip down, you get into, all right, well, the other teams have to make it. So Atlanta, Charlotte, Toronto, Washington, probably not. Detroit, probably not. So it starts to become, all right, we talked about, I think the Nets are going to be the worst team in the league. So take them out of the mix. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe Toronto just kind of stumbles into the play-in tournament. I don't know that that's the worst thing in the world for them. My question is, can they be a little more frisky than that? Because if we're all kind of in agreement that that's the top 8, guess what that means? One of those top 8 teams is falling out. One of them's going to have the Memphis Grizzlies year where just everybody gets hurt, the wheels come off, and they're like, forget it. You know what we can do? We're actually a good team, but what we can do right now, our best thing is lose a whole bunch of games and get into the capture the flag derby, right? Let's try to get there to get after that. So I think Toronto is one of those teams that could be positioned to then, hey, you know what? We can be the 8th seed. Let's push. Let's go. There's an awful lot of talent on this team. And then that's where does Bruce Brown become a trade chip to, all right, we've got a lot on the wing. Let's go get ourselves another big. Let's get it somebody who can be kind of someone who can play with Barnes and Barrett and quickly, and maybe even Pirtle. Like, is there somebody else who can really space and stretch the floor for us? What about Olynyk? Does Olynyk make sense? Maybe we look to move him as well. He's on a pretty tradable contract on the extension he signed. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of different ways this can go for Toronto. So I'm excited to watch what they kind of develop into and grow into, because there's, like you said before, there are an awful lot of really fun pieces on this Raptors team.
Keith, I like, did you say capture the flag? Is that what we're going with for the
I
tank
think
race
so. That's
Cooper
not
flag?
mine by any means. Like, I've seen that other places. That seems where people are going with, is capture the flag.
I like it. I'm on board with that. That's a good one. I was thinking, like, do you try to come up with some kind of a rhyme, lag behind, lag for a flag or something like that. But capture the flag is better. I like that. I like that.
And I'll say this too, whether he's the number 2 pick or he can pass Cooper Flag, race for ace. That's the other guy, Ace Bailey, right? It's a race for ace. Like, that's where it's at. All right. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we erase for ace. I don't know. We erase wins for ace. I don't know. We'll keep workshopping it. But yeah, I think it's capture the flag and the race for ace for right now. So.
Good job. I like it. Good job to whoever came up with those ones. Those are quality. I think I'm probably going to wind up having to use those. But that does it. Keith, I think that gets us through. One big question for all 30 NBA teams. We went through them all. Tomorrow we'll have Front Office Friday, so join us live for that show. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll be taking all your questions and comments. And of course, right around the corner, it's about here. We're going to have training camp starting up, media days, all that kind of stuff. So get ready, because it's coming. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. And Keith, we're going to have a fun Front Office Friday tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always fun. So I'm looking forward to that. Ask us, your big questions about teams, and we'll give you our thoughts on where we're at with some of these teams and the like. With that, if there's anything else you guys want to get into, that's what Fridays are for. It's your show. We always have a lot of fun with those. But yeah, a little bit longer of a show today, but I'm glad we were able to knock out the big questions, because once camp starts, we're gonna have a whole lot of stuff to react to, this guy came back and looks pretty good, or this guy's still recovering from injury or whatever it may be. We got 10 to 15 pounds of muscle watch coming, so that's there. It's get your media day bingo cards ready, because there's going to be so and so shot 500 jump shots a day, and now you're going to be a 3-point shooter. It's funny, did you see somebody posted the Isaiah Hartenstein playing a pickup run? He's doing a bunch of ball handling, and the way they tagged it was, can you imagine if we saw, I don't know, I can't remember who it was, but an NFL offensive tackle running touchdown routes, and it's I don't know, might be a problem this year. And it's kind of this is what happens but that's part of what we love about the silliness of the NBA.
Absolutely.
It's a silly league, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Optimism rules during this time of year. Nobody has lost any games right now. Everybody's in great shape. Everybody's coming off of their summer vacations. They got their new haircuts. By the way, maybe the biggest question, now that I mentioned haircuts, what does Jimmy Butler look like on media day?
Oh, yeah. He'll have something. He's going to do
He'll have something.
Yeah, something crazy, because he always does.
I can't wait.
The other really fun one was somebody posted the annual, Ben Simmons is looking pretty good. And it was J.E. Skeets said, we are here in the off season, and it's Ben Simmons looks pretty good, and then it's media day, training camp's open. So it's we're right there, right on the cusp. So
it is a yearly passage. It's a signal of the passage of time. It's just like the weather starting to change lets you know that Halloween is around the corner. You start seeing Christmas lights up, lets you know you get closer to Christmas. Hearing Ben Simmons looks good lets you know that media day is almost there. But thank you, everybody, for joining the show. We appreciate all of you for being here. Again, make sure you subscribe, and then don't forget to give us your thoughts in the comment section. Till next time, everybody. See ya, and stay safe.